The next project is I've got to get a tractor going. It's over here. Not this thing with wheels, this is the golf cart. Right here, there's a tractor. Got to the golf cart, the tires leak, one really bad. I found a spare tire, it only leaks a little bit. So I'm gonna put this on. It should last me at least 10-20 minutes. Tires are rounded. Looks like the electrics are there. Bet the batteries are dead. The batteries were very dead, but I found a way around that. It works. Mostly. Found the tractor. I think it'll roll. Oh yeah. I gotta move some more stuff before I get it all the way out. And this is the tractor I was going for. This is a Gard'n Mast'r garden tractor. These were built in the 1950s by the Garden Company. It's kind of neat because this was built in the post-war era where people really used whatever they had. Let me show you what I mean. Rear axle? Yeah, that's a cut-down car rear end. It actually kind of looks like that Pontiac rear end that's in my sand buggy. It's narrowed, uses a 3-speed car transmission. From that car transmission, there's just a coupler, and that's what connects to the rear axle, keeping this thing as short as possible. The steering box is from a car. Here is the Gard'n Mast'r tag. It actually was officially made like this. There's some cast pieces that are unique to this old Briggs and Stratton motor. But seeing how you're using car parts behind a 9-horsepower motor, this thing's pretty heavy duty. It just done a lot of work. I actually used to do tractor pulling in the 4-H club with this. Here I am in the early 80s. They would put a bunch of weight blocks on a skid and we'd try to pull them across a concrete slab. My dad had made some modifications for this, the turf tires for concrete, the lightweight front end for balance, and wheelie bars per the rules. And at one point I pulled over 5,000 pounds on a sled across concrete with this very tractor. This is kind of important to me, it's a bit of history, and I want to get it running again, see if I can get it to move. It's only a 9-horse, how hard can it be? I've taken the hood off so I can get to the motor a little better. Here you can see the old style Briggs and Stratton, the updraft carb. The factory equipped with a hand crank. My dad modernized it with one of the wraparound rope starter styles. We've got the kill switch mounted to the side of the engine directly next to the exhaust. So you have heat, ignition, and fuel all in the same convenient area. If you go to shut it off, you can't reach it in an emergency and you burn yourself. Clutch, hand operated in out. Standard 3-speed transmission. First reverse, second third. Throttle on the steering column. Got the 3-point hitch with a lever. So you can just manually operate that. It's got a plow blade operated off foot pedals. So you can lift and lower that with your feet. It even has an angle feature. So you just pull the pin, move it to a new hole. Very fancy. On the brakes, there's an individual brake on each rear wheel. So that stops this tire, the other one stops the other tire. You got to hit them both in order to stop the whole thing. Now this is the gear reduction style motor. You can see the gearbox there, so it's a 6-to-1 box in there. Then it goes to a clutch, and then we got a chain drive down to the transmission. I couldn't find a rope to pull start it, but the hand crank is conveniently located under the seat. Hold the plug so we can see if we have anything that resembles spark. Nothing. Nothing at all. So let's dig deeper. Pulled off this cover where the kill switch is. That covers up the points. Luckily this is the older style motor that the points are on the outside, so I don't have to yank the flywheel off to get to them. I'm expecting those are corroded because I know how long this has been sitting. So I'm going to clean those up and hopefully then we get something that resembles spark. Now I filed the points, and while I was doing that I was looking. This here is a lead for a kill switch. My dad added that. It wasn't factory, and that was because I was like, I don't know, 8 or 7 when I was driving this thing around. He wanted me able to kill the motor from up there, and that's the same kill switch that's been on there for probably 40 years. But what I noticed is it went through the case. If you can see that, looks like it might have been pinched a little bit. So if that grounded out, that would kill your spark. Because the way these things shut off, on the original kill switch, that button just moves a contact out, and that contact hits this point connector, grounds the thing out, and that kills it. And now we've got this. It almost looks a little intermittent, but we definitely have sparks. I don't know if I have a bad ground here or something's a little flaky. I'm going to put it back together and see if we can get it to fire. Alright. Something is now hitting inside the case. It looks like there's mouse nets going in a circle there. So let's assume they'll just wear themselves off. Might go to the rope to get it spinning more. Going the modern style here. That's a good sound. It'll run. We got spark. Now we need some fuel. Found a new problem. Added some gas, and it's all coming right out. Now it's going into a can. This is supposed to be a fuel shut off, but it doesn't seem to be doing the shutting off part. I got it pretty tight. Yeah, I'm making a mess here. I'm not sure why this bowl isn't sealing either. Sometimes these old cork gaskets, they shrink from sitting, and this has been sitting a long time. And sometimes they'll expand and start sealing after a little bit. So we're gonna tighten that back down. It's slowed down. Hopefully that'll expand and seal up. Otherwise I gotta replace the gasket or, well, figure out what's wrong with that valve too, because we should be able to shut it off entirely. But while this is happening, the bowl is filling up. So, you know, already that's a win. That fuel leak is slowed down to a slow drip, and it's all the way on the other side of the motor's exhaust. So I'm gonna see if this will work. See if we can actually get this thing to fire up and run on its own fuel. Oh, now I got fuel pouring out the carburetor. That's weird. It didn't pour out until I pulled it over. Let's see if the standard float bowl fix can be applied. Sure, that'll work fine. Oh, hey, spit fuel out. Let's turn off the choke. It might have plenty. More's coming out. It sounds like it was running too rich. It looked like the fuel was overflowing in the carburetor. That's a little better. Well, that was a great thing. Appear to have blown part of the muffler off. Lots of stuff blew out of the motor. I think a lot of things have been living in there. Hopefully they're not anymore. Let's fire it up again and see what happens. The fuel problem was not fixed. Or maybe it was. It wasn't really consistent. Either way, I needed to take it for a drive. I drove it, a few carb adjustments. I'm going to button the thing back up, put the hood back on. We'll see how it goes. The carburetor was never quite right, and as it heated up it started smoking slightly, so everything was pretty normal. close to 40 years since I sat in that seat and that thing went. I'm happy with the progress, so I'll do some more work on it later. And that was a year ago. I had some other projects that took up the rest of my time there. So I just stuffed it in this container, and I figured I'd get back to it eventually. Now that eventually is here, I'm going to try to get back to it. While the exhaust was good before, it leaves a little bit to be desired now. We're going to see how rusted this muffler is. Fairly. It's turning. Only took a little bit of mangling. Yeah, this probably is worth replacing. I'm going to pop this carburetor off and see what I can do with it. I'm amazed how many of those bolts still turn. Went looking for parts for my old carburetor, and I found for about the same price, I could buy a brand new carburetor. And now I have all the parts I need, if they fit. I got the new carb on, along with all the disposable plastic fuel line fittings that came with it. I even popped 10 bucks for a new muffler. We're gonna have to see if this thing runs. Emergency brake when the plow hits the ground. Turning on the fuel. It wouldn't start, so I loaded up on a trailer to bring it up to the garage, where I had a little more room to work. I also wanted to dig up the original tires. Now we need to be very, very quiet. We're hunting tires. Last time anyone remembers seeing the original tires to that tractor, well, this was a building and they were inside it. So let's see what we got. I'm already seeing tractor parts. That's a good sign. There's some bicycles back there. And, oh, what do I see here? Those are the original tires. I just got to get them out of here without everything falling on me. Moss on one side, wood on the other. That'll become earth very soon. This used to be part of the roof. That'll be dirt soon too. Here is the original tire. Actually, it looks pretty decent. Tread's good. Wait, do you have a mini bike in here? Hold on a second. We're doing some further digging. I see the one rim, and under there, I see a fender. And there, I see handlebars. We are digging this thing out of here. All right, get more roof out of here. This actually looks like the other original rim. So I think I have both rims and one tire from that tractor. Down the other original tire, see why it's off the rim. The entire bead's ripped out of it. That is probably not patchable. We got priorities here. Because I think it's an old Honda CT70. Apparently something was living in here a while ago. Huh. Well, can't really lift off the seat anymore. You know what? This is starting to become familiar to me. Whoops, bent the handlebar. We've got vines that have actually grown through the control cables. I can't actually take it out without cutting this vine. Now I might be able to get this out of here. Oh, the rear wheel rolls. That's something. Well, it rolled a little bit. Alright, it's not rolling now. Kind of rolls somewhat. As I was pulling this out, I started remembering this thing. I built this. Notice that engine is a CDI version, and it has a low and high range with super wide foot pegs. That's not a CT70 engine. That is out of a Honda ATC. Notice the bright yellow paint on the coil here, the yellow on the brake pedal. and the yellow on this CDI box. All that yellow got painted when I put together an ATC from a few different pieces of a few different vehicles, which I then drove quite thoroughly until I broke the frame in half and enjoyed every minute of it. Realized the motors are almost identical, and I swapped that into this bike chassis. Completely forgot about that. That would have been somewhere around 35 years ago I did that. Well, I'm saving this thing. Well, parts of it. I got more parts around. I'm going to put about 10 psi in this old tire. That way it shouldn't explode too badly if there's a problem. And we'll see if it holds air. 2-ply rating. Not the strongest tires in the world. No wonder the other one exploded. This one might too. There, 10 even. Don't hear any hissing. I want to take off this plow to make it a little easier to move around. And the plow drops out the bottom with a single pin, which is easy. But it looks like to get it out from underneath the tractor, you have to kind of drive over the plow itself. Pulled out the spark plug. Put it in reverse. Get out the hand crank. Now it turns over easy. And now I can just maneuver this thing around as needed. It's been several days. This tire still holds air. So I'm going to call this one totally fine and just do a little refresh on the rim. I did some digging online and it looked like they used the same color scheme on all these tractors. I think an International Harvester red will be good. Looks very tractory. Let's see how hard it is to take these tires off of here. If I remember correctly, there's wheel weights in here too. Oh, it's moving. Oh yeah, this is going nice. On the last one here, let's see how this all comes apart. All right, there's the tire. And this is the wheel weight. Look pretty nicely made. That probably is a factory thing. When you're doing tractor pulling, you have to weigh everything to try to get your weight right for the scales. As I recall, those are 45 pounds a piece. Now, I'll try to get this lined up. Seems like a really bad design. All right, maybe we'll put the lug bolts through the rim first, and then stick the weight on that. All right. Looks like we're kind of getting somewhere here. Now all I have to do is get this on there. Somehow I have to get those to line up. Using the socket and the extension as a lever to try to twist them around and lift them up, I got a few of them started. This is actually going together. I went and got the cheapest tire I could find. With a coupon code, it was under $100 delivered. And the best part is it's tubeless. A lot of tires this type are tube type, and then you need to buy a tube also. This one, I shouldn't need to buy anything extra. I found a drawer full of old valve stems, but they don't look used. They look new, just old. That one looks like it's never been installed and has a core. We'll try this one. All I have to do is wrestle it on this old rim. We might be in good shape. This one doesn't feel very flexible. 8-ply rating. That might be why. This is an easy way to drive it up a loading ramp too. Should have thought of this before. At least I thought of it eventually. I had no luck mounting that tire, and I ran out of time again. Now I'm going to load it onto another trailer. Not only has this video spanned 2 years, it's now spanned over 2,000 miles. Because I dragged this back home, I'm going to get it running back here at the shop. I did have one casualty on this drive. This fender. It was flapping just a little bit, and then at one point, about 5 days into the trip, it flipped over and moved this way. I'm noticing that this still has rust on it, so that had to be cracked originally, and then as it flapped, it looks like it fatigued the metal down here till it got all the way to the end, and I had to break that off on the road in order to keep it from flapping into anything else. Now these are not the original fenders. My dad added these for the pulling competition because one year they added a rule saying that tractors needed fenders. I guess kids and open tires seem wrong somehow. So I don't actually need these and they aren't original. I never actually got this tire mounted myself. It's not very flexible and I had a lot of trouble with it. I didn't have the right tools and I was running out of time. So I gave it to someone to put on that had the right machine and they were able to put it on but never could get air in it. I guess the rust-pitted rims might have something to do with an air leak. I've had good luck on these pitted rims with putting some bead sealer in. Kind of fills the pits, acts as a lubricant, and then seals afterwards. I usually goop it on pretty heavy because I usually have lots of problems with my rims. The technique is you put the tie down around the center of the tire and that squishes the center part in and the sidewalls go outwards. Sometimes it mostly compresses right where you ratchet it. So you go around, squish it a little bit, try to get that bead to seat all the way around. As it starts to fill with air, that gets a lot of tension, so be careful. Oh, and I leave the core out. It seems to fill faster that way. Let's put that back in there. We're getting some air in the tire. Now we release this thing. Got 20. We're good. Now there's not much documentation on these Gard'n Masters to identify what year it is by its frame serial number, but these Briggs and Stratton engines are very well documented. I can take those numbers and figure out what year this engine is. Now my dad bought this tractor back in the early 60s, and it was all original back then. Anything that's changed over the years is something he or I did, and that engine is original. We've got a model number, and then more numbers. That engine was made in December of '56, which means the tractor was probably built in '57. I really suspect these points are the issue. Filing points is usually a slow and tedious process, pretty much always. Now normally you're cutting with just the spring pressure of the points, but to make it go a little faster, sometimes I'll put a screwdriver behind it and push the gap closed, get a little more pressure on that file, it goes a little bit faster. Still takes forever, especially when they're this badly corroded. I had absolutely no luck filing the points, so I want to take them out. Now these are an external design, which actually makes it a little trickier. Normally you just undo the screws and they come right out. But these are driven on a shaft. And in order to get the shaft to lock on that point arm, they use a taper. Kind of like a tie rod end has a tapered seat, which means you actually have to break the taper mechanically. I put the nut on first so I don't mangle the threads. There we go. And now these come right out. Here you can see the shaft, and all the way at the back is that little taper that the points ride on. This is one of those things you're not supposed to do to points. But since these points come apart, that's the quick and easy way. I got tired of cranking this over by hand, so I came up with this setup. It's a drill with an adapter, extension, 1/4" square drive socket, and a 1/4" T-handle. Works great. It's hard to see in this lighting, but there really is a little bit of spark in there. That's promising. Discovered a problem with the car. That choke lever hits the hood. You can't actually really operate it in any way. Not running right, but it is running. Sounds like it's way too rich. That is a brand new carburetor. That doesn't mean anything though these days. Well, it looks like gas is leaking directly out. I took apart the brand new carburetor and the old carburetor, figuring I'd take the best parts of each and put them together. Problem is, things are different sizes. There's the old float pin, there's the new float pin. The diameter is actually different, the old one's bigger. This is probably one of those cases where you're supposed to buy good quality parts and fix the old carburetor if you really want it to work. I don't have them, so I'm going to make this new cheap carburetor work. The biggest problem with this new carburetor is the fuel just going directly into it and just flooding everything. Now this piece actually floats in the fuel, and when there's enough fuel it should go up and shut off that little valve there. Normally these are supposed to sit level, like somewhere around there. This one sits down a little bit. This small tab here is thin sheet metal. You just bend that to set the height. I set it so it's a little bit up, which makes a little more pressure on that seat. We'll see how that one works. I want to show you one thing about these carburetors. They have an idle mixture screw, which is fairly normal. Then there's a main jet in the bottom of the carburetor, which is also fairly normal. But the neat part is that main jet gets a needle in it. So rather than having to change jet sizes, you adjust this screw and you basically block off part of that hole and you can adjust your jet from the outside. I like that. I got the carburetor back together. I don't see any fuel dripping, so we might be okay there. See if we still have spark. Not seeing any spark. That could be an issue. Sometimes I have real good spark. Sometimes it doesn't seem like I have any. I'm suspicious of this wire and a bad connection inside. One last bolt. Two last bolts. It spins freely but doesn't want to come off. We'll just take off the head of this bolt, fix it afterwards. There we go. Yep, a little bit of mouse nest. You can start to see some cooling fins again. Now we have spark, sometimes. Looks like most of the time. There, not a little bit. There's more. Very intermittent. Wonder if this really old and rusty spark plug terminal has anything to do with it. Maybe that has a bad connection. Now I pried off this terminal end, and what we have is a connector that has a prong. When you install it, that prong sticks through the insulation and goes to the center. So the spark goes through that little spike there. Alright, just straight wire. That's a good sign. No resistance here at all. This is one of the old wires from that $2 Jeep with the boots that are all torn up. Obviously I saved them. So we're going to take it apart and see what we got. Those look like fancy terminals. Now I've got this modern style terminal end. We're going to go ahead and install this one on the wire. Not exactly the way you're supposed to do this, but all it is a connection. It doesn't really have to be pretty. Then I think I want a 90-degree bend at the end here. So let's add that in. There. Now I have a lot more modern terminal end and still totally uninsulated like original. Definitely an inconsistent spark. As I was digging through my bin of used spark plugs to find another one and see if maybe the plug was an issue, I realized something. This is a plug out of the tractor. This is brand new. My dad never would have bought a new spark plug unless he was having major problems with ignition. I'm betting he was having the same problem I was, and that's how this thing ended up getting parked for so many years. The coil and magnets that actually create the spark for this engine are underneath this flywheel. Did a little digging. On these engines, apparently the coils fail fairly regularly and the replacements aren't always good. I'm going to go with something I'm sure will work. Now I've got the original points here, and this is what actually triggers the ignition and gets your timing right. So I'm going to reuse these, just disconnect the original ignition system from them. Then in place of the original ignition, I'm going to clip a wire onto the points, and that's going to go to the negative side of my coil. Then the positive side, I'm going to run to a battery. Now let's see if this works. Gotta make sure this coil is secure. There we go. That's what it should do. Now I got the engine warmed up, it's time to play what's in my oil pan. I know for sure this oil hasn't been changed since last century. This might be 1980s oil. The drain plug is buried behind this frame rail here. There's a little cutout where you can reach a wrench in, but not the easiest system. It's old oil, but I don't see any water or anything else. A little gas smelling, but with the carb flooding before, that makes sense. Doesn't look bad at all, except for the blackness. Other than that, it looks good. Now that is not the original front tire. The original one had a different tread pattern. And I know that because there used to be an original tire here. But that is also not the original tire. This one was replaced fairly recently, I think somewhere in the 90s, and it's smaller than the correct size tire. I'm okay with the tread not matching, but I don't like that one being smaller. I did a little poking around eBay, and even though the original tires aren't available, I can get these little mini 3-rib tractor tires. And these are the right diameter and rim size, and I think that'll be the right vintage tractor look. I got 2 of those with tubes for a little over 50 bucks. Now there's more than one kind of split rim out there. Like on that truck back there. These have a retaining ring that's held on with air pressure. And you have to get that to seat right, otherwise it can come flying off. I don't like playing with those. Split rims like the front of this tractor, I do like. Because these unbolt. And then you can just bolt them back together. Don't need to worry about anything flying apart. You don't even need to take them off the axle. You can take them apart right here, mounted to the tractor. I could pop on a new tire and put this rim piece on the outside and be all together. The only reason I took everything apart is I have some more of that paint left over from the rear rims. When dealing with tires with tubes, first thing I do is stuff the tube inside the tire. And then it usually goes in all kind of wrinkly and all over the place. So I'm going to give the tube a little bit of air. And then work out the wrinkles. Make sure it's all pointing the right way. There we go. Now the tube's in place all the way around. No wrinkles. And when those rims come together, this sort of holds it back a bit. And that way it doesn't pinch the tube when you tighten the rims down. I've got the rim pieces I painted last night. The outer section has the hole for the valve stem, so I'm going to put that on first, because you need that to line up. And I just orient it so the valve stem points straight out. The other half has a grease fitting that greases all these big long needle bearings. And I put a steel sleeve in there just to protect the bearings when I paint them. I want to put that in a different location than the valve stem. So that way you're not trying to do too many things in the same place, get a little more room. So we're going to put it around 180 off the valve stem. Grease fitting, valve stem, holes aligned. We're ready to put the bolts in. The first 2 bolts I put in are going to be opposite each other, and then I can put the rest in after those are tightened down. At this point you can double check and make sure you didn't pinch the tube. One nice thing about tires with tubes, you don't have to worry about the bead seating. The tube's going to fill it up no matter what. There we go. Now these are a D-Stone tire. They say they're good for 35 PSI. I'm not sure about that rim though. So I'm gonna put about 15, 20 in it, something like that. That looks like about the right bounce. These definitely have the right tractor look to them. When I cut off that free spinning bolt on the front cover, I scratched up the cover pretty good. So I went ahead and shot a little satin black on it. It's almost a little too shiny though. Kind of makes me want to paint the rest of the engine. I straightened out the ignition a little bit. I took the old spark plug wire. I'm just shoving it down out of the way. That's still coming out of the coil, but there's no points to trigger it. I took a new longer wire with a real plug end, ran that down through here underneath, and securely mounted the coil under the engine with a zip tie. Then I ran a wire with an actual connector to the points, and another wire going to the back of the tractor. And that wire runs back here to a battery that's secured to the hitch, and it has a quick release terminal, which gives me a way to shut it off. Now, one thing I want to correct, earlier in this video I called this a 3-point hitch. That's totally wrong. In order to be a 3-point hitch, it needs to mount by 3 points. There's 2 lower links and 1 upper link, making 3. This does not have an upper link, so it is not a 3-point hitch. Maybe it's a 2-point hitch, I don't know what it's called, but either way, it moves an implement up and down, and that's the main thing. Now this is the oil fill here. It's got a neat little spring-loaded flip-top lid, and that way it always stays secure. It is kind of a pain to fill though. I'm going to try to sneak a small funnel in here, hold that thing open. With the spring inside there, it actually is kind of hard to fit a funnel in. You can see why they changed its design later on. Now I picked the oil based on the fact there was a picture of a green tractor on it, so it's got to be the right stuff. Definitely better than the 30-year-old stuff that was in there. Now we get the fun of the test drive. Had to try out second gear, then third gear. Of course I had to try out the turning brakes. The carb was still not right. But it was a lot of fun pretending I was 10 years old again and just cruising around on the tractor. Well, that's it for this video. It made me real happy to get this tractor up and running again and drive it again, and it sounded pretty good. That car ignition system works way better than the original Magneto. At least the 60-year-old original Magneto. I'm going to need to come up with a better ignition solution, because right now the battery will run dead eventually, but I bet it'll take a long time. It's very likely that all the problems I thought were a carb were actually ignition. And this carb is bad. Not only is the carburetor not working right, the brand new fuel filter leaks. Granted, it's mostly leaking the fuel on the gearbox, but that part's really hot, and it's kind of all in the same area. So I think I'm going to do something about that too. I ordered a carb kit for the original carburetor. That's going to go back on here. I also want to do something about paint. And this is something I'm going to have to think about a little bit. When I first started using this tractor, it was already all rusty like this. So this is the way I remember it being. I found a few forum posts where people restore these tractors, and they say that John Deere green is the right color. And this is John Deere green. That's the original color. That's the John Deere green. Those are not the same thing. Definitely not right. You can even see that's where the original sticker was. Now normal me would say close enough and just painted that color. But since my family's had such a long history of this tractor, I'm not sure if good enough is good enough. It's got me a little confused. So I'll think about that a little bit before I do part 2 on this. There will be a part 2. This is something I really want to get running right. And I also have you to thank for that. Since you guys have been watching the ads in this video, I'm going to fix this thing up a lot better than I would have normally. And I'm happy about that. Hope you're having fun too, and we'll see you next time. I was taking a look at the plow I took off. This has had a hard life. The main beam is bent into a bit of a banana shape. I think that used to be straight. And the welds here are all cracked. Not even sure what this piece is. That is cracked and re-welded. Those look like they've been re-welded too. There's a diagonal brace on one side, but the weld is broken clean off. And the other side is just completely missing. You can just see a little bit of weld where it used to be. And there's a removable wear edge that is worn down flat with the blade itself and looks a little bit warped along the way. I'm pretty sure my dad used this to backfill the foundation of the house I grew up in, and that was the beginning of its life. That plow has done a lot of work.